Welcome to Devotionary, where we make the Bible accessible and applicable. We all want to make a difference in this life. It's hardwired into us. In fact, most of us long for a sense of accomplishment and hate the idea of living our life with nothing to show for it when we're done. And that same sense of impact and influence should be especially true for those of us who claim to be followers of Christ. We're to live with a sense of purpose and with a desire to leave a positive impression on those with whom we live and interact in this life, just as Jesus did when he walked this earth. Jesus was an influencer. He made a difference. His life left an impression on everyone he met, and as his followers, we are to do the same. But to make an impact in this life, we have to model our lives after his, seeking to bear the image of God to those who need to experience the love of God. And he went down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and he was teaching them on the Sabbath, and they were astonished at his teaching, for his word possessed authority. Luke 4, verses 31 through 32. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." Mark 15, verse 39. We've already examined the fact that man was made in the image of God, but sin has marred that image, making it impossible for man to bear the likeness of God as originally intended. Yet the Bible explains that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, became a man just like Adam, being born in the likeness of men. Philippians 2, verse 7. The author of Hebrews tells us because God's children are human beings, made of flesh and blood, the Son also became flesh and blood. For only as a human being could he die, and only by dying could he break the power of the devil, who had the power of death. Hebrews 2, verse 14. And as a man, Jesus became the visible image of the invisible God. Colossians 1, verse 15. The Apostle John, referring to Jesus, states that no one has ever seen God. The only God, who is at the Father's side, he has made him known. John 1, verse 18. Jesus became the consummate human model of the divine, living his life in such a way that his Father's character was perfectly displayed for all to see. But Jesus wasn't simply a man attempting to act in godlike ways. He was the God-man, 100% human and 100% divine. He was literal God in literal human flesh. The Apostle John put it this way: "In the beginning the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. So the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son." John 1, verses 1 through 5, and verse 14. Jesus was God in the flesh. The Latin word incarnatus, from which we derive our English word incarnate, literally means to make into flesh. The term incarnation refers to Jesus' coming to earth in the form of an infant son born to Mary through the Holy Spirit. This miraculous union between divinity and humanity allowed Jesus to demonstrate how man was always intended to live, in unbroken fellowship with God the Father and in perfect obedience to his will. Jesus did what no other man had ever been able to do before: live a sinless life that demonstrated the manner in which all men had been intended to bear the image of God. And his actions and words are recorded in the Gospels, providing us with a primer on the sanctified life. His life is provided as a model for what it means to be a child of God, filled with and empowered by the Spirit of God. He's the icon of godliness, and the one to whom we look for guidance and inspiration for godly living. The two verses that open this episode are meant to provide two different occasions where Jesus modeled the Christ life for us. One involves his teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. Luke records that the audience in the synagogue that day were astonished at his teaching because he spoke with authority. His words carried weight and demanded a response. He wasn't simply sharing his opinion or quoting the insights of others. He spoke authoritatively, as one who was confident in what he had to say. He spoke truth, and he was confident in doing so because his source was God the Father. Jesus had made it clear that his words were those of God. I do nothing on my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me. John 8, verse 28. Jesus operated according to the will of his Father. Everything he said and did was ordained by God. I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. John 5, verse 30. This is what it means to bear the image of God. It is to reflect his character by doing his will, and by doing so, to model what it means to be his child. When Jesus spoke that day in the synagogue, the people were amazed at his words, because he spoke the words of God. He delivered the message of God. But that message wasn't always well received. The Pharisees refused to hear what Jesus had to say. I came from God, and I am here. I came not of my own accord, but he sent me. Why do you not understand what I say? It's because you cannot bear to hear my word. You are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. John 8, verses 42 through 45. Jesus spoke for God. He knew the will and the words of God, and he wasn't afraid to share what he knew with others. That's what it means to bear God's image. It is to be his hands and feet, acting in ways that reflect his will. But it's also to be his messenger, declaring his truth even to those who don't want to hear it. The second verse is found in the story of Jesus' death. Having watched Jesus suffer and die on the cross, a lone centurion was brought to a place of faith by all that he had seen Jesus endure. He had witnessed Jesus being beaten and abused, and had probably taken part in the proceedings. He had seen Jesus being humiliated, tortured, and brutally crucified, but had never heard Jesus utter a single word in anger. This man had witnessed exactly what the prophet Isaiah had predicted. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Isaiah 53, verse 7. The Apostle Peter records, he did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threaten revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. 1 Peter 2, verse 23. Jesus bore the image of God the Father, and he did so flawlessly. He obeyed perfectly, even to the point of submitting himself to death on a cross, all so he could accomplish the will of his Father. And that's what we've been asked to do. We have been chosen by God to be his ambassadors on this earth, bearing his message to a lost and dying world. Paul encourages us to live clean, innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights in a world full of crooked and perverse people. Philippians 2, verse 15. Peter tells us, be careful to live properly among your unbelieving neighbors. Then even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior, and they will give honor to God when he judges the world. 1 Peter 2, verse 12. Jesus modeled the sanctified life for us. He provided us with a living example of what it means to live set apart to God. From its humble beginnings in Bethlehem to its final minutes on the cross, his life brought glory and honor to God. The Jews in the synagogue that day had been amazed at the authority of his words. The centurion had been blown away by the conduct of Jesus as he suffered and died. Jesus bore the image of God wherever he went and in all that he did. People couldn't help but notice that this man was different. They didn't always like what they saw and heard, but they couldn't ignore the fact that Jesus was different. By living his life according to the will of God and in the power of the Holy Spirit, Jesus made an impact on the lives of all with whom he came into contact. At one point in his earthly ministry, Jesus miraculously healed a paralyzed man, and Matthew records, fear swept through the crowd as they saw this happen, and they praised God for giving humans such authority. Matthew 9, verse 8. Jesus, the image bearer, made an impact wherever he went, and so should we.